Hello students, hope all of you are doing well. I think in the earlier videos we have learned about the parts of the human eye, followed by accommodation of the human eye, in which we have learned about changes seen in the eye when you view the objects which are placed near and far away from you. Children, now let us start with the next part of the lesson, where we are going to learn about adaptations seen in the human eye. And these adaptations can be of two types, namely light adaptation followed by dark adaptation. Children, in these adaptations, there are certain structures which play a very important role in our eye. The first one is iris. We know that iris comprises circular muscles followed by radial muscles, which help in constriction and dilation of pupil. So thus you can say that the first structure which helps in the adaptation in the human eye is the pupil, a small opening left behind by the iris. Along with this, the retina comprises the sensitive cells, the nerve cells such as rods and cones, which have a pigment such as rhodopsin followed by iodopsin. Children, so these are the parts which actually take part in the light adaptation followed by the dark adaptation. Now, in fact, here the adaptation is based on the intensity of a light. It is based on the intensity of a light to which our eyes are exposed. Such as, we can name it as a bright light or the dim light. So, in these two intensity of the light, we find the changes in our eye with respect to the pupil followed by the rods and cones. Children, now let us start with the dark adaptation. Here, carefully observe the diagrams what I have drawn here. So in the first diagram, let us name this as a second one as a B. The first diagram represents the dark adaptation. What do you mean by dark adaptation? Dark adaptation is nothing but when our eyes are exposed to the dim light. When our eyes are exposed to the dim light, then we find the changes, and those changes, what do we call it, as a dark adaptation. Now let us take certain examples. Imagine you are going to watch a movie in a theater. Probably you are going in the afternoon, that is the noon show. It means you're moving from a region of bright lighted area to a region of dim lighted area. In the sense, imagine you are moving into the cinema hall. So when a person enters into the cinema hall, the eyes of that person is exposed to the dim light. So when the eyes are exposed to the dim light, probably you would have experienced the minute when you just step into the cinema hall in that afternoon, You experience the blindness for few seconds. It looks as though you have become blind for few seconds. Maybe after few seconds you are able to observe the people around you, the objects around you. So in that short duration of a time, we find certain changes occurring in our eye. Okay, children. So we call that as a dark adaptation. So what are the changes that occurs in our eye? In fact, the minute when the person's eye is exposed to the dim light, we know that in the dim lights we have these rods which are stimulated. So rods are sensitive to dim light, they are stimulated and they produce the pigment known as a rhodopsin. Fine. In fact, along with the production of rhodopsin, what happens? The first change, what do we find is the pupil dilates. Children, you can find here in the diagram there is an increase in the size of the pupil. So the pupil dilates. Again, you can find here there is an increase in the size of the pupil. Why do the pupil dilate? The pupil dilates to allow more light to enter into the eye. Yes, children. So what is the first change that we find in the eye? The pupil undergoes dilation so that it allows more light to enter into the eye. And probably, children, you know that when the pupil dilates, we have this iris comprising circular muscles followed by radial muscles. So in the sense, the circular muscles will undergo relaxation, the radial muscles undergo contraction, which enable the pupil to undergo dilation. So when more light enters into the eye, you are able to view the objects. In the course of this duration, again the rhodopsin is regenerated. The rhodopsin is produced. Okay, the rhodopsin is regenerated, which help you to view the objects in the dim light. Okay, now, yes, children. So what are the changes that you find when your eye is exposed to the dim light? The pupil undergoes dilation, allowing more light to enter into the eye, followed by there is a production of rhodopsin in the rods, which help you to observe the objects in the dim light. Children, let me give you one more example. Take an example that you have your PT period somewhere around 12:30 in the afternoon. After playing PT for about 30 to 40 minutes, you walk into the room. So again you find the difference in the intensity of the light. So in the playground you had a high intensity of the light, and when you enter into your classroom you have a low intensity of a light. So the minute when you step into the classroom, again you experience that blindness for about some time, and then you are able to view the objects clearly. Children, this can be one of the question expected for give reason. Okay, so when they ask you, you have to write both the statements very clearly. Many of the times I have seen the children writing rods are regenerated. Children, rods are actually the nerve cells which are found in the retina. So they are not regenerated. Only in the dim light the pigment is regenerated. So that you can observe in the dim light. Fine. Now let us learn about the light adaptation. Children, after watching a movie for about 2 hours, you move out of the cinema hall. You move out of the cinema hall to outside, which has a bright sunlight, probably around 2:30 or 2 o'clock. Still there is a bright sunlight. So in this case, you are moving from a region of dim lighted area to a region of a bright lighted area. So what do you experience the minute when you just step out? You experience a dazzling effect in your eye. So it looks as though the light is shining inside your eye. So what do we call it as a dazzling effect in your eye? And after some time you are able to view the objects clearly even outside. So we call this as a light adaptation. So one experiences the light adaptation when he moves from a dim lighted area to a bright lighted area. Fine, children. Now let's see what are the changes occurring in your eye when you are in the bright lit area. The first change is pupil undergoes constriction. Since your eye is exposed to the bright light, immediately the pupil will undergo constriction. Here you can see that the size of the pupil is decreased. Right, children? Okay. So pupil constricts to allow less light to enter into the eye. So what is the first change that you find? The pupil undergoes constriction. It undergoes constriction to allow less light to enter into the eye. So in this case, we know that the circular muscles undergo constriction and the radial muscles undergo relaxation, which enable the pupil to undergo constriction or decrease in its size. Along with this, we know that since your eyes are exposed to the bright light, now the rhodopsin which was functioning in the cinema hall, so the rhodopsin gets broken down, or you can say it is degenerated. So you can see the opposite words. So the rhodopsin is degenerated, or you can say broken down. Now since your eye is exposed to the bright light, what should be produced? The iodopsin, which is stimulated by the bright light, gets produced. The iodopsin is produced, which enable you to view the objects or identify the color of the objects. Yes, children. Yes, thus you can say that in the light adaptation we find two changes in our eye. That is, pupil undergoes constriction so that it allows only less light to enter into the eye. So the entire sentence has to be written properly, children. Okay. And along with that, the rhodopsin, which was active in the dim light, now it gets broken down, or it is degenerated, and the iodopsin will be produced so that after few seconds you are able to view the objects clearly. Fine, children. So this is about the light followed by dark adaptation. So you can expect these concept for reasoning questions in your board examination. Let us learn about some of the defects which are related with our eye. To begin with, let us start with the first defect of the eye, known as myopia, or what do we call it as a short-sightedness or nearsightedness. Children, so what is myopia? Myopia is a defect in which the nearby objects are seen clearly, okay, whereas the far placed objects appear blurred. Okay, children, so when you write the definition of a myopia, so be very careful. In case of a myopia, okay, to that person the nearby objects are seen clearly, whereas far placed objects appear blurred. Children, you cannot say the word cannot see. You cannot use the word cannot see. You can observe the objects, but they are not seen clearly. Hence, you have to use the word the far placed objects appear blurred, whereas nearby objects are seen clearly. Fine, children. Okay. So, probably this is more common among the children. Maybe when you look at your classmates, fine. Some of the children, when they are seated in the last row, and if something is written on the blackboard, they might find it difficult to read those letters which are written on the blackboard. In such case, the child may be suffering from a defect known as a myopia. So in that case, the child is able to see the nearby objects clearly, whereas he cannot see the words or the letters written on the blackboard clearly. Okay. Now, children, what are the reasons for the child to suffer from the myopia? Now, it may be the reason, or now take an example. If you observe the eyeball here, okay, if you just observe the eyeball, so you can say that the eyeball is elongated. It is elongated from front to back. So one of the reasons for the myopia is the eyeball is elongated. The eyeball is elongated from front to back. Or you can say the eyeball is lengthened from front to back. So here you can see, compare. So this eyeball, especially the eyeball is elongated from front to back. Children, you have to mention the word eyeball. By chance, if you just write eye, you are losing marks. You have to write the eyeball is elongated. And these are the two keywords. You have to write it as from front to back. Okay, children. So this may be one of the reasons for a child to suffer from myopia. Along with that, the second reason is the lens may be too curved. or it is more convex. The lens may be more convex. This may be one of the reason, or it can be both the reasons responsible for a child to suffer from myopia. So what are the possible reasons due to which a child suffers from myopia? The first reason is the eyeball is elongated from front to back, or the lens is too curved. So in that situation, since the eyeball is elongated from front to back, so whenever the light enters into the eye, what happens? The light rays, they meet in front of the retina. Instead of forming an image on the yellow spot, the light rays are meeting at a point in front of the retina, or you can say that the image of the object is formed in front of the retina, due to which he cannot view the objects which are placed far away. It appears blurred, since the image is formed in front of the retina, as there is a lengthening of eyeball. Okay, so what is the remedial measure? In such case, the doctor advises him to wear the spectacles, and the spectacles will have a concave lens. Okay, so what is the rectification for this? The rectification is the child has to wear the concave lens. So what happens in the concave lens? So in case of a concave lens, the light rays which are emerging from the object, first what happens? They try to diverge. So you can say that when a person wears the concave lens, or we call it as a diverging lens. Okay, so the light rays will diverge. Okay, and then it starts converging in such a way that all the light rays will fall on the yellow spot. Okay, so thus the concave lens helps in diverging the light rays, and then all the light rays will converge on the yellow spot, so that you can view the objects, the distant objects also clearly. Fine, children. Children, you can expect this diagram in the board exam, okay, where they will ask you to draw a diagram along with the rectification for myopia. So what is the lens used for myopia? It is the biconcave lens or concave lens. Now let us move on to the next defect, which is more common among the elderly people, known as a hyperopia or hypermetropia. So what is the meaning of a hypermetropia? It is nothing but long-sightedness or a far-sightedness. Children, it's very easy. So what is the meaning of a hypermetropia? In case of hypermetropia, a person can see the nearby objects appear blurred. The nearby objects appear blurred, whereas a far placed objects appear clearly. Just opposite to that of the myopia. So in case of a hypermetropia or a hyperopia, a person can, when he looks at the nearby objects, it appears blurred, whereas a far placed objects appear clearly. Okay, so what are the reasons for a hypermetropia? Children, just observe. Okay, so in case of the myopia, the eyeball was lengthened from front to back, whereas in case of a hypermetropia, the eyeball is shortened. The eyeball is shortened from front to back. So what is the first reason? The eyeball is shortened from front to back. So this may be one of the reasons for a person to suffer from hypermetropia. Okay, again the second reason is the lens is too flattened. So you can say that the lens is too flattened. So it can be one of the reason, or it can be both the reason for a person to suffer from hypermetropia. Okay children, so what are the reasons for a person to suffer from a hypermetropia? The eyeball is shortened from front to back, and the lens is too flat. Fine. So what is a rectification when a person is suffering from a hypermetropia? Now in this condition, when the light enters into the eye, since the eyeball is shortened, you find all the light rays are meeting at a point behind the retina. So it means the image is formed behind the retina. The image is formed behind the retina. Okay. So what is a rectification? In such case, a person has to wear the convex lens. So what happens in the convex lens? When he wears the convex lens, the light rays which are emerging, when they fall on the convex lens, it converges. It converges the light rays in such a way that all the light rays meet at yellow spot. So thus you can say that the rectification lens for the hypermetropia is convex lens. So when the light rays which is reflected or entering into the eye from the object falls on the convex lens, it converges the light rays in such a way that all the light rays now meet at yellow spot on the retina. Children, you have to draw the arrow marks on these light rays, otherwise you will be losing marks. Okay, so that when it falls on the yellow spot, now we can view the objects clearly. Okay children, okay, so these are the two defects. Along with that, there is one more defect which is common among the elderly people, known as a presbyopia. So in case of a presbyopia, you can observe the same defects where he can view the objects which are placed far away from him clearly, and again the nearby objects appear blurred. Okay, now what is the reason for this presbyopia which is common among the old people? In such case, the lens would have lost its flexibility. So it means there is a loss of flexibility in the lens. Because of the age, the metabolism would have come down. So there is a loss of flexibility of this lens. So it means the lens is not becoming too curved or too flat depending on the distance of the object. Since the lens has lost its flexibility, again he starts suffering from a condition which is similar to the hypermetropia, in which he can view the objects which are placed far away clearly, but the nearby objects appear blurred. Okay, so what do we call that condition as? Presbyopia. How it can be rectified? It can be rectified again when a person wears the convex lens. So by wearing the convex lens, again the image can be made to fall on the retina. Fine children. Now